Welcome into episode 46 of the Woo Pig Weekly Podcast from the Home Field Studio, your weekly source for all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Episode 46 is brought to you by Home Field, home of premium vintage collegiate apparel that you want to check out. They've got fantastic Razorback gear ranging from football, baseball, basketball, anything you could think of. You can use our promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off your order thanks to Variety Sports Network. And we'll just dive in here and, it was just a rough weekend for the football team. There's no general way to put that, as in, they failed to A&M 34-22 in a game where I never thought I'd find myself saying offense cost us the game, but that was the case in this game, realistically. Defense really came out of halftime and really were firing on all cylinders. We're ready to play, come out, had a quick pick six with Lorando Snacks Johnson. He came out and got a quick interception for Arkansas and, got us back on the board and gave us some momentum, came back, held them to a field goal attempt, which they missed, and, just couldn't capitalize on that momentum we got there. So it was an interesting game by far. So, give us your quick thoughts on just the game overall before we start diving into some specifics.
Yeah. You really said it pretty well about the offense kind of laying an egg in this one. I don't think we scored our first offensive touchdown until there was like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. It was kind of a strange game, hard fought game. I think both teams did play hard. I'm not going to argue that. I don't think we ever really laid down and quit in this game on an offense or defense perspective, but our O-line really struggled. A&M's got a pretty solid defensive line, and we made them look even better than I think they are, unfortunately. So had some more issues there. One thing to note, we didn't have any penalties in this game on offense or defense. We had 0 penalties, so some improvement made there. I think a little bit of that was based off the refs. I saw some holding calls on both teams that didn't get called, and there was, if you watch the game, there were 2 pass interference calls that didn't get called, one against us and then one against A&M. So those kind of offset, and I wasn't too upset about either one of those. But I think that did play a little bit into it. The refs kind of let the guys play. So we did clean some things up, plus had a little bit of help. So improvement there. But overall, like you said, defense played really well in this game. They kept us in it pretty much the entirety of the game. It was just unfortunate that the offense really kind of was stumbling over themselves on a lot of these plays. Couldn't pass protect well, couldn't run block well. And if you have issues in both of those departments, you're going to have a hard game.
Yeah. The glaring issue here is clearly the offensive line. They looked decent last week against LSU, and it kind of gave you, okay, maybe they're on the upswing. They've started to figure out some things. That's clearly not the case. Right now, that's the weakest point. KJ is getting hit nearly every play. He barely has time to get the snap before, you've got defenders in the backfield swarming him, which even hurts him more because he doesn't have time to even get out of the pocket to scramble. And even when he did, they were on top of him and he didn't have enough space. And I think a lot of this is not necessarily poor game planning or scheming, but you got to look at the beginning game. You had Luke Haas go out of the game early. Turns out after the game, coach announced he's out for the season, broke his collarbone clavicle on that, his only catch of the game where he was going out of bounds and just landed weird on his shoulder. Unfortunate for him, as he was really developing into a great tight end and a great receiver for KJ, and really I think was turning into that safety blanket type of player for KJ, to where if he had some pressure, was having to kind of move out of the pocket, that short 5 to 6 yard pass, where he would, flow to the open part of the field and be open for KJ to get the ball out and then make play in space. So it really sucks to lose him for the season. Guys are going to have to step up. That, next man up mentality, that's what we're going to have. You got Nathan Bax. It's more of a blocking tight end. He's in on a lot of run plays. And then another thing to note, we did get Rocket back in this game, which is fantastic. But when you look at, just because of the poor offensive line play, he only had 11 rushing attempts for 34 yards. He did have one great play where he took a screen pass and took it for a big game. But besides that, he was kind of neutralized in this game. And then, I think you only saw KJ pass the ball 17 times, and that's due to the pressure he got. And, you had guys only get 3-2 receptions in this game, and it's because KJ didn't have time to throw the ball. you could tell our line was getting worn out late in the game because he was under constant pressure every single play towards the end of this game. So, like, it was a struggle overall from passing and rushing. I think we went rush heavy in this game. You see that with Rocket being back. We rushed 39 times. 18 of those, I will say, probably weren't designed just because KJ was getting flushed out of the pocket and he was having to basically run for his life. So from that perspective, I think the offensive line is really the root of a lot of these problems Arkansas is having offensively.
Yeah, I couldn't really agree more. I think that's kind of the consensus from the fan base right now. There's other issues, but none quite as glaring and quite as impactful as our offensive line issues have been so far. It's tough to kind of scheme towards your strengths and away from your weaknesses from an offense standpoint. It's difficult for Dan Enos right now to call plays when half the plays he's calling, I think he's calling the right plays. The announcers in this game were kind of criticizing how few deep shots we took. I saw 5-6 plays that were called deep shots, play action passes that weren't able to develop. You had Andrew Armstrong streaking wide open, and KJ was getting sacked by the time the ball needed to be coming out. It just wasn't developing. There wasn't enough time back there. Even if you looked at it from like an NFL standpoint, where the passes have to come out a little bit quicker, I still don't even think that would have been the case, even if KJ would have his timing a little bit quicker than normal college averages. So no matter how you slice it, it just wasn't optimal from an offensive line standpoint. And so it really kind of showed through. I actually thought we started this game out trying to be pass heavy from the get-go and then let the run game kind of balance off of that. And it was a little bit of a struggle. We got behind the chains quite a few on the first 2 drives, and we were luckily able to convert some 3rd and longs early on, 4 or 5 different 3rd and longs on our first 2 possessions, and get down into the red zone where things unfortunately stalled out for us, and we had to settle for 2 field goals. So I think that was kind of bad omen number 1, that we were moving the ball a little bit early on some good 3rd down conversions. One of those being to Luke Haas. That play that he got injured on was actually like a 3rd and 13 conversion that he made a great play on. But overall, that kind of set the tone early that we were going to have a hard time scoring, and it just seemed like that carried on throughout the rest of the game. It was tough sledding, to say the least.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a really tough game when you see us play so well against LSU the previous week and then come out and just look like a completely different team. Like you said, the scheming might have been there, but like we said, when the root of the problem is your offensive line isn't blocking, I mean, it doesn't matter how well you've got a game plan. If you don't have time to do anything, that's going to be shut down. And I think the other thing fans, and even myself, I find myself asking is, I still don't understand on those 4th down and short plays, why are we not lining KJ up under center and, doing a Philly special, the tush push, something, because as big as he is, we shouldn't have a problem. Sam Pittman was asked about that again in the 3rd straight post-game press conference, and he said that he doesn't think it'll work. But before you don't think it'll work, at least try it one time. And if it doesn't work that one time, sure. But I think that kind of maybe tells you that at this point in time, he doesn't have that confidence in the offensive line that they could get that enough push for him to get the 1st down. But if you think about it, even if they don't necessarily get the best push, KJ's big enough. If he just reaches forward and has guys pushing behind him, I think he's going to get that 1st down 8, 9 out of 10 times. So it's still a mystery to me on why we're lining up in the shotgun to begin with.
Yeah, my biggest critique around those plays, which we've had them in literally every game so far this year, where we've had poor success. I know against Western Carolina, I think we actually did try a sneak and it didn't go our way on a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1. I can't remember. And then, like, seems to your point, the last few weeks we've had multiple plays in multiple games where it's either been 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, and we run a QB draw out of the shotgun and the play just doesn't develop. So I think everybody anticipates us to run the ball on those 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situations, and are putting 8, 9 guys in the box. I know there was a replay of the 4th and 1, if I remember correctly, where there was 4 players, 2 guys on the line, and then 2 linebackers directly behind those linemen for A&M, and we ran right to them. I mean, they knew exactly what play we were running from the get-go, and they shifted some of their linebackers over to fill those holes, and we still didn't check out of that play. So to me, that was another sign that we're not calling audibles when we should, which I don't think we call audibles at all, frankly, which is a problem. But anyways, that to me was kind of a bad sign that we had a play drawn up and called in that the defense had schemed and matched up on that well, and we didn't either call a timeout and check out of that play or call a check down from the line while you're out there. So I don't know if KJ's just not comfortable with calling the audibles there on certain looks like that, where he needs to be able to read the defense and either like flip the play design and run to the opposite side or something of that nature. And then the flip side of that, with us being so predictable on some of these 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s on running, based off of all of the games so far this year, you saw A&M pull a play off where they were on a 4th and 1, ran a naked bootleg, hit the tight end, and ended up getting a touchdown out of it, if I remember correctly. Just because we were expecting them to run the ball, they pull a little sneaky play-action play in there, and we haven't tried that this year on any of these 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situations. We have not tried to pass, and I just can't help but think that that's, to your point, lack of confidence in all parts of the game. So we don't have confidence to run the sneak. We don't have confidence to pass the ball on 4th down on some of these little rollouts like that, or hit a quick slant or something of that nature. And so the only thing that I think they do have some sort of confidence in is lining KJ up in the shotgun to have him get a little bit of momentum going as he's running towards the line. But then you got to execute from the offensive line standpoint on those plays too. And just none of that is happening. So I've got a lot of questions on all of our kind of play calls in those short yardage scenarios, whether it's a run or a lack of a pass. It seems like we've been very vanilla, and that we only have just a couple of plays that we're comfortable calling in those scenarios, and it's coming back to bite us. I mean, everybody knows what's coming. The film's out there at this point, and we're not changing. So something's got to give in those plays, and then something's got to give just from an offensive line standpoint overall.
Yeah, it just, back to what we said at the beginning, it just really sucks that, our defense kept us in this game. We won the turnover battle 3-1, and we still couldn't come away with a win in this game just because the offense is the problem right now. And historically, for Arkansas, that's never the problem. Usually we struggle defensively, and that's why we give up and lose games. But like we said, I think you got to look at this game. The offense was the reason we didn't win. I mean, we still put up 22 points. And if our offense was clicking on at least half the cylinders, I feel like we could have really brought this down the wire and actually won this game. So I think this start thinking about the tough question at the end of the season with Pittman. I'm not 100% on board with the let's get rid of him train, because I don't believe that the football program is ready to invest in big money to go out and hire a big name coach. And at that point, if you're not serious enough to do that, there's no point in getting rid of Pittman to just restart the coaching hiring cycle, him having to recruit his guys differently, and to just have very similar results in win totals, to be right back where we are right now with being frustrated and upset that this team with a whole load of potential is terrible right now. And so until the university gets ready and your check says, okay, we're going to go out and sling out some big money here on this X person, then I don't think you're wasting your time and money and getting rid of Pittman, having to pay out the rest of whatever, depending on his contract details, whatever would be left of his contract, and then paying a new coach.
Yeah, a good bit about what's left on his contract, just for some detail there, is if he, at the point of firing, if that's what it comes to, if he is above 500, you got to pay out, it's like 75% or something like that of his remaining contract. And if he's under 500 on his career here, I think it's only like a half of that or something. It's a difference of around $5 million, if I remember correctly, if it were to happen at the end of this season, if he has a bad enough record that he's under 500 from the overall standpoint. So I'm with you. I don't really think that firing Pittman is the answer. There may need to be some changes on the offensive line coaching standpoint. I know Pittman did address that as well and come out and supported that around, there's other schools out here trying to take away our offensive line coach. Help me with his name if you can remember it. I
Coach
had on the tip
Kennedy.
of my tongue. Yep, Coach Kennedy. And I mean, you do have to give Pittman credit. Kennedy has had us have some pretty good offensive lines over the last couple of years. I think they're just having some growing pains right now, adjusting to the slightly different style of offense. It's a little bit more of a traditional pocket pass style, pro style, if you will. Not so much an option where the guys are moving laterally as often as they used to. So I think there's some adjustments that are still kind of happening, and I think that's also happening with KJ. I think KJ's comfortableness with the offense is still to be desired, I guess I could say. So there's some things there to consider. However, I do think that you're at the point in the year where you have to start shuffling guys around out of their positions and seeing if you have better success, shaking things up. Maybe pull Bo Limmer out of the center position, move him to left guard or something, try to shore up that left-hand side where it seems like we've struggled so much. And I don't really know if that's going to fix anything. But at this point, I don't think it would hurt to try, if that makes sense. So I think we're going to see some changes coming. I think there's already been some talk about running Dominic Johnson out there in the tight end spot to maybe help a little bit on some chip blocks on the edges and things of that nature, especially now that you lose Luke Haas. I know Varkey's Gums, he got some snaps later on in this game and can't remember if he had one or two receptions, maybe just one, if I remember correctly. Yeah, just one reception. And but he was involved. You could see him out there involved, but I think he has something to be desired on the pass blocking and run blocking side of things. So going to try to figure some things out there. It's unfortunate that we're already having some injury bug issues. You and I've talked about this all off season and all kind of early season around. That's going to be critical in us having a good year. If we can avoid the injury bug, we're having some issues with it already. Luke Haas is obviously out for the season now, which is a huge loss, frankly, with how well he's kind of been coming on. And then I know Dwight McLaughlin, I think he got a concussion in this game and is questionable for the Ole Miss game. So just guys getting banged up. Another one, John Morgan III, left late in this game with a apparent head or neck injury. I think there's been some details come out where it's nothing too critical. I think it was just out of an abundance of caution. That he should be back for us sometime this year. I'm not sure the time frame on that, but that's going to be another thing to watch for all year long is how banged up we are. It's going to kind of compound how poorly our offensive line has been playing too.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where, like you said, we've got to shuffle some guys around because I feel like it's very hard for me to believe that it could get any worse than it already is. I mean, it feels like we're almost at rock bottom there with how our offensive line's been playing. So, maybe that's what it takes. If you think about it scheming wise too, Bo Limmer, this is his first year at center as well. He transitioned over last year from playing that guard and tackle spot last year to, center, which is probably an adjustment for him. Whenever we got guys on this roster that have played center before, transferred in from somewhere. We've got a few transfers that have played center at the previous school they were at. So why not give those guys a shot? Let Bo Limmer, like we said, maybe move to that left guard spot and, give some help on that side of the line. It's been really one of the bigger issues of the season. But when you go back down to it, like we said, you've got to figure out some things, get some things shifted. And I think at the end of the season, before decisions are made regarding Pittman, I think you look at your assistant coaches first. That would be my thing. And then from there would be Pittman. But if you look at it defensively, I think those co-defensive coordinators and Travis Williams and Marcus Woodson have been doing fantastic. Our defense, even though they still struggle a little bit at times, it is the SEC, but they've looked astronomically better than last season, in my opinion. And, just with the number of turnovers we've been able to force this year on the season, where we've had a abundance of interceptions and forced fumbles compared to last year, especially on the interception side. We had a decent amount of forced fumbles last year just because of Bumper Poole and Drew Sanders coming in and bringing the wood. But on that secondary side, I think our secondary is tremendously improved. That's what Marcus Woodson is known for. Came in from Florida State, where I think they had the top one or two secondaries in the country last year. So, I mean, you got to figure out some talent there, but that's also his coaching too. As we wrap up this recap of week 5 We'll go around the league where Kentucky beat Florida 33-14, which was a surprising game for me. I didn't see Florida losing this bad or allowing that many yards rushing. So that kind of maybe gives me a little hope for our matchup with Florida, even though it is on the road in the swamp. At this point, we've got to see improvement in other areas before we even think about that matchup. Then you have Georgia beating Auburn 27-20. Auburn took Georgia the ropes here, and either Georgia just had a really bad game or Auburn's really getting it figured out.
I think at this point in the year, with some of the close games Georgia's allowed in almost every single week, it seems like, where they've been able to pull away late in a few, but it seems like week in and week out they're tied at halftime or it's close at half or something of that nature. I think they're not quite the team that they were last year. Obviously, their quarterback situation attributes a lot to that, and I think they lost basically their entire defensive line to the NFL. So there's a lot that they had to replace. Obviously, they've got a ton of talent on that team year in and year out. So you're replacing studs with other studs, but I think they're still kind of figuring some things out. But I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year, Georgia's probably clicking on all cylinders by then. But there's been some scares so far for sure.
Yeah, that's very true. And then you look at Missouri beating Vanderbilt 38-21. Ole Miss coming out and beating LSU 55-49 in a shootout, which if you got a chance to tune into this game due to our game being the 11 a.m. game, this was a heck of a game. I mean, Kiffin had a good game. It was at home for Ole Miss, so that's probably part of it compared to if it was in Baton Rouge, maybe the ball goes the other way. But I think there was no defense in this game, with just how high scoring this was. That's 100 and quick math, 104 points scored in this game total. So
that's a lot.
That's a lot of points for.
It's like a Big 12 game.
That's very true. And then you have Tennessee beating South Carolina 41-20 and Alabama beating Mississippi State 40-17. So we see Mississippi State getting beat up again. It's like you mentioned last week. This is going to be a key matchup for Arkansas season when we come back home after these next two road games. This really needs to be a victory if we're going to try to, in a sense, get back on track, because just the way we look Saturday, I don't see us winning either of the next two games. I like to be optimistic, and it would be the Arkansas way to come out and play good against either Ole Miss or Alabama, both. But you just never know at this point.
Yeah, I think being realistic, we can assume those will be losses unless we come out and play one of the better games we've played all year. It'd have to be kind of like that LSU game with a little bit better run game stacked with that too. So it's possible. Alabama's down. I think they're getting their stuff figured out too, though. Honestly, they fixed a lot of things in that Mississippi State game. Looked to me like kind of got a little bit of offensive rhythm. Could be just the matchup. I think Mississippi State's having a really rough year. And to your point, that is to me going to be the keep your job or get fired game. Whether I don't know if it would happen after that game if we did potentially lose to Mississippi State. I don't think it would happen directly after that, but I do think that would be a very critical talking point at the end of the year. That sure, we lost to some of these teams that we were supposed to lose to that are better than us. I don't think Mississippi State is one of those teams that you can claim that for. And so if you come home to your place after a tough road stretch and don't find a way to bounce it back, I think that's going to be a pretty bad omen for a lot of people.
Yeah. So let's hope that they get some things turned around in practice that this weekend can at least come out and look better offensively and be able to put up some points against Ole Miss. If they really, according to this LSU game, if they don't have that good of a defense, we should be at least able to score some, even if we don't win this game or keep it close. I feel like we should be able to put up, 14, 20, 21 points, or at least in this game, just to see that we still have life on offense. So this will be an interesting game to see this weekend. We'll talk more about that in our preview coming up here in a little bit. But with that, we'll take a quick ad break and we'll be back with some more basketball, soccer, and volleyball news and catch you up on all things Arkansas.
You know what I like? I like to be comfortable. I also love representing my favorite sports teams. And in the Clutch, I am able to have the best of both worlds. In the Clutch Apparel is your one-stop shop for all things sports. They have officially licensed gear from all your favorite teams and players from the NHL, MLB, NFL, and more. They have sports classic tees from yesteryear and beyond. Check out their full website in the link down below. When you enter the promo code Variety Sports, you get 10% off everything site-wide. Feel comfortable with your sports apparel and go over to their website now at endtheclutch.com. And don't forget to use our code Variety Sports to get 10% off.
All right, we are back and with some basketball news. We mentioned it last week, but the week is here. Arkansas's Red and White Showcase is going to be tomorrow, Wednesday, October 4th. And I think the entire state of Arkansas is excited for this. It's your first look at this team. You know, we know it's just a red-white game. They're not going to play, in a sense, a real game where they're going as hard as they can. You know, this is just to get the first public look at this team and, you know, kind of get an idea of how they're going to play together, what they're going to look like. And I'm excited for it. Yeah,
I am too. I think to your point, this isn't going to be something you want to watch too closely from a, you know, where are we kind of standpoint. But the couple of things I'm going to be watching for the most is obviously where some of these transfers stack up, and then where Trevin Brazile is. How healthy is he? Does he still have his explosiveness? Are we going to see that? I mean, you may not be able to tell really from this game, but maybe he has a couple of highlight slam jam dunks, you know, that kind of tell you, okay, yeah, he's back to healthy. He didn't lose a little bit of his bounce or anything like that. So that's going to be one of the main things I watch for. But it's definitely an exciting time of year. Musselman always has his team prepared. I mean, it's a reload, not rebuild scenario each year. So I'm excited to see where we can make it. We've talked about it in previous episodes. It just seems like if he keeps on reloading like this, it's going to be a matter of when and not if we get that national championship home, or at least the SEC championship.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I want to say I'm not 100% sure how much of Brazile we'll see in this game, just because I think last week or around something, they said he was still a week or two out from, you know, full practice, so he might be getting in some light work.
Okay.
But I don't know if he's fully back yet.
I thought I'd seen he was cleared to practice, but maybe
he
was
might have been. I might
practice.
be remembering something from 2-3 weeks ago, but I think it'll be exciting, like you said, if he is doing a lot in this game. Like you said, how explosive is he? What kind of, you know, offense can you expect from him this year? So I think there's a lot of optimism and excitement in the air for Arkansas basketball. You know, we've got a matchup coming pretty soon in October during the Arkansas's bye week where we'll be taking on Purdue in an exhibition game. You know, so that'll be a good test for Arkansas right out of, you know, before season even starts, you know, as they'll have to go up against Zach Edey, the big man from Purdue that was pretty dominant last year and decided to come back for another season. So it'll be a great first test for this team to see how well can they compete, you know, early on, especially, you know, I think that'll be beneficial to get a tough matchup like that really early on. That way we can really adjust ourselves and kind of get an idea of what does work, what doesn't work, and what we need to fix.
Very true.
So we'll jump over here to Arkansas soccer, where Seth will recap the latest on soccer news, and we'll move from there.
Yeah, so Arkansas soccer took on Missouri on the 28th of September, where we won this game in kind of a nail biter, 1-0. So the only goal of the match was scored by Ava Tankersley on an early penalty kick. So this actually extends Arkansas's winning streak to 5. We won the 4 league matches for the 3rd time in the past 4 seasons. So that's kind of a good little highlight on the continued success that we're having year in and year out. So definitely building a solid program. So freshman goalkeeper Phoebe Carver made her 3rd start in this game and has a shutout in each of Arkansas's last 3 opponents. So can't really dream of a better start as a freshman from that standpoint. So that's been really, really cool to see. Then Arkansas is going to return to the pitch on Thursday to take on Georgia back home at 6 p.m. So you guys get out there for that. Try to break that attendance record that we set against Alabama a week or 2 ago. And kind of overall, we're stacked up at 6th in 3 of the 4 polls in the nation, and then 10th in the 4th one. So overall, we're continuing to kind of climb the rankings. We're getting better week in and week out, and this is slowly becoming a really exciting team to watch. I think their offense has been there since day one, but I think the defensive side of this team is really starting to click. So that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, Kobe Hill's just done a phenomenal job with this soccer team, and just the program he's been able to build. I feel like we say this about a lot of the coaches, but it's true. He doesn't rebuild; he just reloads year in and out, year out. And I think you see a lot of that due to the transfer portal. You're able to bring in people that has experience that's pretty quick compared to you're bringing in freshmen that may take some time to adjust to the college game. Whereas you're getting players that have 1, 2, 3 years of experience under the belt already, and you can just plug them in and get ready to go. So I think he's built a phenomenal program here. Can't wait to see what the rest of the season looks like. I think we make another run in the NCAA tournament. We got really close last year, ran into Florida State, who was one of the top teams last year, lost that match, and I believe the Elite Eight, if I remember correctly.
It was either the 16 or the 8, yeah.
But we made it pretty deep. And then I think last year we made it to the SEC championships again. And Arkansas notoriously made it to this game several years in a row and have not been able to win it. So who knows? Maybe this year could be the year. We hope so. And so it'll be interesting to see. But like I said, get out there Thursday and go check out the soccer team. They're doing fantastic right now. And the support is unmatched right now. And so we'll jump over to Arkansas volleyball, where our Arkansas volleyball team has been doing pretty dang good here recently. They beat number 24 ranked Auburn 3-0 on September 27th. And they are now currently ranked 13th in the coaches poll, which is tied for the highest ranking in program history since 1998. So that's a big time for this program that is really coming together. I think you saw some struggles early at the gate. They had a tough early non-conference test with the number 1 team in the country with Wisconsin, where they played them really hard, really tough. So I think you're seeing this team slowly get there. And I think they're kind of blooming in a sense at the right moment with how they performed so far in SEC play. And they'll actually go on the road for the first time in SEC play as they take on LSU this Wednesday, October the 4th at 7 p.m. So good things happening for the volleyball team as well. It's very exciting. And then Coach Deifel strikes again when you move over to Arkansas softball, as she received a commitment from 2025 infielder Brinley Bain. From what I've read, I believe she's expected to be a top 10 recruit in that 2025 class. And it's not surprising. It's the Deifel effect. I feel like it's in full force here in Fayetteville. There's excitement this year. We just mentioned transfer class. There was another fantastic one brought in along with a fantastic freshman class. Like we said, Deifel, she reloaded again this year. And I think this year has the chance to rival that team 2 years ago that hit a record number of home runs with just the sheer amount of talent from the offensive side of the plate that we brought in over the offseason.
There's unlimited firepower on this team, just with a couple of the transfers and then a couple of the returnees. This team really does have the opportunity to be pretty special. I mean, last year's team was good. This year's team has a chance to be even better. I think we're deeper across the board, and losing Denise Chels really hurts. But I think we can fill that hole, and I think the offense is going to make up for where we might lack in pitching, and I don't think we're going to lack that much in pitching either.
Yeah, that's true. You will miss that, and we talked about a few episodes ago. You got the exciting news: Ryland Hedgecock's back, and she was one of Arkansas's top bombers last year. And like we said, those transfers we brought in can hit the ball pretty well too. So exciting things. Plus, you got the addition of Danielle Gibson coming back. If you haven't checked it out, we got a chance to talk to her on a show probably about a month or so ago now. So go check that out if you haven't got a chance to do that. Really great interview with her. She was a fan favorite here at Arkansas, and she graduated, went and coached 1 year as a grad assistant at Georgia, but then had the opportunity. Coach Deifel brought her back, and I think she has been welcomed back with open arms, has also still continued her professional career with Athletes Unlimited softball, and they've kind of brought that here to Arkansas, as Arkansas softball has been doing that a little bit. So it's exciting things going on with this program. New hitting coach with Gasso coming in from Utah, son of softball legend Patty Gasso. So exciting things with this program, and I think everybody's ready to see what they're going to do on the diamond here in the next few months as we get ready for season to open up. And so that brings us over to our preview of Arkansas versus Ole Miss coming up this Saturday, October 7th at 6:30 p.m. So we'll have the primetime game on SEC Network this weekend, which I'm not the happiest about that with how things went last week, but we'll see what happens of it. A night game down in Oxford will be interesting for sure. The spread starts out with Ole Miss at -11.5, which I'm surprised is not higher with just how we looked last week. And it's even smaller than the LSU matchup that was at 17.5. So the one notable thing here is the over-under for that game is 63.5. So they're expecting a lot of points in this game. It could be lopsided. It might not be. We'll just have to see. That goes with correcting things we talked about earlier in the show from the A&M game. But when you start breaking down some stats for Ole Miss, they average around 44.6 points per game, and they're averaging 517.4 total yards per game. So they're putting up a lot of yards in the first 5 games of the season. They're averaging 336.6 of that passing, 180.8 rushing. But they are also allowing 408 yards per game as well. So like we said, maybe the defense isn't there for them yet. They're allowing a lot of points. We just mentioned that with that shootout they had with LSU. I know it's hard to compare LSU's offense and our offense right now, even though we looked good against them and came out and just didn't perform last week. They're allowing 263 passing yards, 145 rushing yards. So it'll be interesting to see offensively what we get going. But when you talk about key players for Ole Miss, there's 3 players that you've got to mention. And I think the number one is the gunslinger, Jackson Dart, 6'2", 220. Started out his first game of the season came out and had, I believe it was like a 98% completion rate in that first game, something ridiculous. But on the season, he's thrown for 142 passes, completing 91 of those for 64% completion rate, has thrown for 1,485 yards. So has amassed a big total of yards so far this season, has 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But here's what you're going to have to look out for. He's a mobile guy. He's had 51 carries so far this season for 269 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he's not afraid to try to beat you on his legs as well. So he'll be interesting to see how our defense schemes against him and trying to corral him, but also trying to prevent big plays down the field in the passing game.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about this, honestly. I think Lane Kiffin, he's got a great offense. I think he's putting some good pieces together there at Ole Miss. They had we talked about earlier, fantastic game against LSU, just a straight up shootout. I think they may have a little bit of to be desired on defense, the defensive side of things. I think that's kind of standard for Ole Miss, though. We've kind of come to expect that out of them with Lane Kiffin as their coach. So we're definitely going to have to score to keep up. I hope our defense is able to slow them down enough. Our defense has made some big plays, and we've had some, pretty solid success against Ole Miss in the past, and maybe that trend continues on, and we actually show up and have a stellar game against these guys. I think it's gonna be another one of those situations. If we can get Jackson Dart to turn the ball over a couple of times, it's something that he hasn't done a lot this year. That would be big. But if you look at the A&M game, we won the turnover battle, and it didn't equate to a win. So can't just have that. You got to have the offensive performance as well. But getting to Jackson Dart's going to be critical. You can't let him just sit back there and slice and dice us, because he does have the ability to have a very high completion percentage. It's dropped some over the last few weeks, but he's a very, very talented quarterback. Probably one of the most talented we'll have faced at this point. I mean, you can say good things about Daniels at LSU, but I'm not sure but what Jackson Dart might be a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say this game is probably going to be the toughest test for our secondary so far this season, with just the ability at quarterback. Really with Jalen Daniels, you had to worry about him on the ground, and he had a stellar receiver in Malik Neighbors, who's probably going to be easily a first or second round pick. And then on the other side of that, they don't got any shortage of talent in the running back room, as their running back is Quinshon Judkins. If you remember, he beat out Rocket last year for the SEC rushing title. Not necessarily due to Rocket's fault, because he got injured late in the season. So I think if he would have stayed healthy, that last game of the season against Missouri, where we precautionarily took him out of the game, he probably would have won that. But he comes in at 5'11", 210 on the season. He's had 90 carries for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns. He has also had 9 receptions for 84 yards and 1 touchdown. So, he's not a guy that's had the greatest season so far either. It just seems that that's been a thing around the SEC. Is a lot of SEC teams have been struggling this season for some odd reason. And, you're 5 games in, have only rushed for 378 yards. So he's not, I don't know if you're seeing a regression from the incredible freshman season he put together or what, but he's still not a guy to be overlooked at all. And so that's going to be another thing. Our defense is going to have to be getting a push on those first 2 levels of the offensive line and those linebackers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I definitely don't think you can overlook Q. That's kind of what they call him there, but he's an explosive player. They try to get the ball in his hands and just let him do work with it. So how we're able to contain him and Jackson Dart both in the run game is going to be fairly critical. If you can at least bottle up the run to a decent extent and try to make them beat us in the pass game, I think that's probably going to be best case scenario. I mean, I know they can pass the ball well too, and you want to be able to stop that where you can, but you can't stop the run, you can't stop anything. So that's going to be kind of priority number 1 in my mind, is to make life hard for Jackson Dart to scramble, and then make life hard for Quinshon Judkins when he gets those pitch plays and those handoffs.
Yeah. And then finally, you got to look at their top receiver, Jordan Watkins, 5'11", 190. He's had 29 receptions on the season for 450 yards and 2 touchdowns. So very similar guy to, I feel like, maybe Malik Neighbors and Evan Stewart that we've been against in these past 2 games. Not the biggest guy, but has some speed. If I feel correctly about this, didn't they lose one of their top wide receivers for the season early on? I feel like there was another receiver that was high on their radar before season started. I could be wrong on this, but I feel like that seems like something might have happened. But either way, this guy's their top receiver. You've got several other guys to look at, but this is a guy you want to pay attention to. So again, it will be another tall task for our secondary, going to get up against another speedy, fast, explosive receiver. It'll be interesting to see, Marcus Woodson scheming there. On the depth chart this week, Jalen Braxton, the true freshman that played a lot last week, has jumped Jaheim Singletary for that starting defensive back role. So, I think Singletary's struggles have continued. They didn't maybe looked a little better this past game, but I think the coaches really like the play they're getting out of Braxton right now, with him coming in as a highly touted freshman, and he's proven it so far. He's had some good plays so far in the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm going to be curious to see how well we hold up in man coverage. That's really kind of the true test on how well you're able to actually get after the quarterback when you send an extra guy or 2 and you put your guys in man coverage. If we come out the gate, have some instances where we get burned early on some of those top plays, it's going to make defensive scheming for us pretty tough for the rest of the game. We'll have to play a lot more zone, I would imagine, and that'll make it a little bit harder to get to the quarterback. And I think things will maybe kind of spiral out of control, or at least they're going to have an easier time scoring and running the ball. So how well we're able to hold up against some of these quick receivers is going to be very critical.
Yeah. And as we run through a quick injury update here, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Luke Haas out for the season, broken collarbone. I hate to hear that, as I think as the season goes on, you're going to see a lot more play out of him and utilization. But we hope for a successful and speedy recovery, and he gets back to it and can get some offseason work in and come back ready next season to continue improving. And then, like we said, Dwight McGlothern suffered a concussion in the A&M game, and he's questionable for this game this weekend. It all depends on how fast he can progress through that concussion protocol. It's not something you want to take lightly. So, if he can make it through it, great. If he can't, I'm fine with it. I would hate for him to miss this game, but if it's for his health, you've got to do what's right by the athlete. And then finally, John Morgan, is questionable for this game. I think I actually seen he's actually resumed practice this week. I think it might have just been an interesting stinger he got on Saturday, where like Seth said, when anything around that neck head area, you want to be very cautious with, just because that can affect a whole lot. You don't want a guy getting any type of restricted movement or any type of paralyzation due to a football injury and that kind of thing. But if he can make it through practice this week and be ready to go, that's fantastic. But I expect all the coaching staff on here to be very cautious with his return and ease him back into the game. So even if he does play, it might not be for a whole lot of snaps. So that'll be interesting to see. And as we kind of wrap up here, expectations, improvements needed for Arkansas. I think this one's probably pretty clear and number one on the board for everybody. We've got to have better offensive line play in this game if we want to even compete. Like Seth said, with this being a lot of points expected in this game, it's going to have to happen for us to continue this game. And we mentioned shifting in some positions. Well, it was reported that we are potentially practicing this week with having Kudus, who's been playing a tackle spot at center, moving Bo Limmer over to a guard role, moving Latham over to a tackle spot, which this could be tried, see if it works. Bo Limmer is I think he's a true guard tackle. That's where he plays best at. And, if, say Kudus, or even if it's somebody else can come in and perform just as well at that center spot, that's fantastic. You can move Limmer to one of your most experienced leaders on this offensive line to somewhere that he's can be more effective at.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm excited to see kind of how they make some changes here, and hopefully they can get lucky and find some success. I think that's really what it's going to take at this point is, trying to throw something at the wall until it sticks in a way. Because at this point, if you don't make any changes and you just keep throwing the same guys out there, I think it's just going to continue to be a regression week in and week out. But the another thing we didn't really mention earlier on is, as I think Bo Limmer was struggling a bit at center, even getting the snaps in the right position. I know there was a couple of low snaps on the ground that KJ had to pick up that threw timing off on some plays, and there was multiple high snaps in the A&M game, especially not so many in LSU, but in the A&M game for sure, where there were a lot of high snaps KJ was having to catch above his head or at helmet level, which was making the timing a little bit difficult, whether it was a handoff or a design QB draw or even pass plays. He wasn't able to get his eyes on the receivers as quick as he should have. And I definitely think that played a bit into the struggles around timing on pass plays and run plays both. And then obviously not being able to block as well as we should have compounded that. But I'll be looking to see if they can get a little bit more accurate snaps back there to KJ to increase his amount of time with his eyes downfield on some of these snaps. I mean, that millisecond does mean a lot. So that'll be something to watch for, as well as just how well they pass protect and run block.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's a good point. With Bo Limmer not being a true center, he's probably, a lot of these snaps are because he's probably in a sense rushing the snap because he's like, oh, well, I've got to get the ball snapped, but also start blocking as well because that man's coming right as that ball snapped. So he's got to get up and make his block. And for a guy that he hasn't played that position for years, such as some of your true centers that have played that throughout their high school career coming to college, that's new for them. And that's a whole method that you've got to learn. So, maybe that has to do with why he struggled some at center, especially this last game with those high and low snaps, but it'll be interesting to see. And then kind of piggybacking on what we just said, we've got to have better offensive line play. And that ties into, we've got to protect KJ if we have any chance at having any offensive success in this game. He's got to have at least, he doesn't have to have all the time in the world in the pocket, but he's got to have at least a few seconds that he can make a read and get the ball out instead of just getting sacked over and over and over again. Not to mention that's going to, his health at some point, things are going to start hurting and potentially worse. I hope that's not the case, but, when you're taking shots like this, it's tough. I seen it described by George Kittle, that plays for the 49ers. He was interviewed after a game one time, and he said, basically week in and week out, it's like you're involved in a car crash. Your body's just so sore from getting hit. And, typically quarterbacks shouldn't be getting hit that much. But in KJ's case, so far this season, he's been hit a lot. So I'm pretty sure he's probably feeling that. And you've got to protect the guy if you want to have any success. I mean, I know we got a capable backup in Jacoby Criswell, but it's hard to beat KJ Jefferson. He's your starter for a reason. He's the leader of this team. And I think if he can step up and you can get rid of some of that visible frustration that we've seen out of him the past few weeks and have some success, I think this team still has some potential to have a decent season, possibly can right the ship here. And, another thing is we've got Dominique Johnson, like we said, practicing tight end. Like we said, maybe he can get in there and give us some good blocks, but also, give us some dynamic plays since he is a running back. He's got that speed and athleticism. If you can get the ball to him, say out in the flat or in a similar type situation we did with Luke Haas, as get him in some open space, that way he can make something happen. Who knows? Because 2 years ago before he suffered his injuries, he was a pretty dynamic playmaker. He had a big game against LSU 2 years ago that really, equated to the win in that game.
Yeah, that's very true. He did have a big play in that game, but I'll be curious to see, how well he's able to transition over to that. I think it's maybe a slight bit concerning that we are shifting him over to tight end with some of the other tight ends that we've got in the tight end room. A couple freshmen, obviously we've mentioned Marquise Gums. I think where we're lacking there, it's not so much depth. I think it's the blocking ability. Nathan Bax is about the only guy that we've got that's a very consistent lineman type style blocker from a tight end perspective. I don't think you really get that as much out of some of the other guys. I think Luke Haas was the best hybrid, if you will, from a pass catcher plus a good blocking tight end. And so I think that may be part of the reason you're rolling Dominique out there. And it may be partially some of his playmaking ability. He does have fairly good hands from a receiving standpoint. He can lay the wood on guys if he does get the ball in his hands and kind of put some pressure on some of those linebackers he might be matched up with. So I'm curious to see how this one pans out. It's going to be kind of fun and exciting to see. It may not work out well. It may work out great. You never know.
Yeah, there you have it. So that's our Ole Miss preview. We're hoping for the best here. We'll be interested to see what these changes in practice this week, what are the results of them? Did they have success in this game? It's just it will be interesting to see how they come out after such a devastating loss last week where that game could have been won. Seeing us lose, I think it's 12 out of the last 13 now. At some point, is it a curse? Is it just something weird with playing A&M? I don't know, but maybe we can bounce back this week and have a good week. And so we'll run through some upcoming events here. We mentioned most of these earlier, but we'll run through them again for you here as Arkansas men's basketball have the Red and White Showcase tomorrow, October 4th at 6:30 p.m. You have Arkansas volleyball taking on LSU on the road tomorrow, October 4th at 7 p.m. as well. Arkansas is taking on Georgia at home on October 5th at 6 p.m. Like we mentioned, we got Arkansas football taking on number 16 Ole Miss this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. on SEC Network. You got Arkansas soccer going on the road to Auburn on October 8th at 6 p.m. and Arkansas volleyball wrapping things up here at home versus Missouri on October the 8th at 3 p.m. So as always, don't forget to go check out the YouTube page, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Feel free to throw your comments in there, shoot us questions on Twitter. Feel free to engage with us. That's what we're here for, to answer your questions, make this show what you guys want to hear. So feel free just to hit us up on those social media pages. We have a Facebook page as well. So go check all those out. And we'll thank you for listening to today's episode of Woo Pig Weekly. And we'll be right back here next week.